Alright, let's continue our book reading about John Hopkins textbooks of cardiac thoracic surgery, chapter 7, Cervical Management of Emphysema. First, we read a key concept. The epidemiology, it is estimated that 2 to 3 million patients suffer from emphysema. Pathophysiology, except for rare cases caused by enzyme deficiency, smoking is the cause of diffuse emphysema. The smoke destroys lung tissue in an irreversible fashion, leading to bullous formation. The bullae may be relatively small or quite large. Clinical feature: patients are hypoxic and dyspnea. The dyspnea range from mild to need for home oxygen supplementation with subsequent diminish in the quality of life. Diagnostic: clinically, emphysema is subset of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or COPD. The other cause of COPD, including chronic bronchitis and hyperreactive airways, can coexist. Emphysema is diagnosed by pulmonary function testing that shows a decrease in forced expiratory volume in 1 second FEV1 and increase in total lung capacity and residual volume. Treatment: medical cessation of smoking eliminates progression of the disease, but the tissue loss is reversible. Surgical: appropriately selected patients benefit from lung volume reduction surgery and/or resection of giant bullae. Operative mortality is minimal. Operative morbidity is significant, but most patients recover and benefit with an improved quality of life. Okay. Okay. Introduction. Pathophysiology. Emphysema is a pulmonary disease that is one of the conditions that are together characterized as a chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or COPD. The other diseases that are also constituents of the diagnosis of COPD are chronic bronchitis, formally defined as a presence of a productive cough for any 3 months of any 2 consecutive years, and hyperactive airways condition, particularly asthma. Any of these three disease processes can exist independently, but some overlap and coexistence is common. Figure 7.1 display and discuss the interrelationship between these subsets of CPD which typically coexist. Asthma in the figure should be understood as representing all hyperactivity airway condition. The important understanding is that pure emphysema is uncommon. Emphysema literally means to inflate. As illustrated in Figure 7.2, emphysema is defined as enlargement of the airway distal to terminal bronchioles in association with destruction of the normal architecture. This is a result of a permanent and irreversible loss of alveolar septae, as well as loss of the elastic tissues. This tissue loss is not recoverable and distinguishes emphysema from compensatory airspace distension that, for example, is frequently seen in the remaining lung following pneumonectomy. Nearly all emphysema is secondary to injury caused by cigarette smoke, although there is rare hereditary abnormality that is associated with alpha protease inhibitor deficiency. After the cigarette smoke has damaged the airways and parenchyma, causing loss of tissue and destruction of anatomic integrity, the natural tendency is for continued enlargement of the airspace distal to the terminal bronchial. Although this disease progression is caused by multiple factors, the predominant factor is now thought to be continued traction on the damaged and weakness areas by the unopposed traction by the elastic tissue of the surrounding and less damaged lung. This airspace enlarges and eventually coalesces and are defined as bullae when their diameter is 2 cm or more. The expression bullous doesn't identify any particular size, and the actual size may be as small as 2 centimeter or considerably larger, constitu- constituting constituting the so-called giant bullae. All emphysema is bullous, but the size of the bullae vary considerably. In most patients, the disease and the bullous are diffused through the lung, although upper lobe disease is more common than the lower lobe disease. As the disease progresses and the bullae distend further, the actual lung size as well as total and residual lung volumes increase. Ultimately, the increase in lung volume and size causes an anatomic change in the chest with an increase in the chest size, including the anteroposterior dimension of the rib cage with downward flattening of the diaphragm. You can see in the figure 7.1 emphysema, chronic bronchitis, and asthma. Scheme depicting chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. A non-proportional vein diagram shows subset of patients with chronic bronchitis, emphysema, and asthma in the three overlapping circles. Subsets of the patients lying within the rectangle have airway obstruction. Patients with asthma, subsets 9, are defined as having completely reversible airway obstruction and lie entirely within their rectangle. Their diagnosis is unequivocal. Patients with subset 6 and 7 have partially reversible airway obstruction with chronic productive cough or emphysema, respectively. Patients in subset 8 have feature of all three disorders. Okay, 7 and 6. It may be difficult to ascertain whether the patient in subset 6 and 8 indeed have asthma or whether they have developed bronchial hyperactivity as a complication of chronic bronchitis or emphysema. The history helps. Patients in subset 3 have a chronic productive cough with the airway obstruction but no emphysema. It is not known how large this subset is, because epidemiologic studies with CT scan, the most sensitive in vivo imaging technique for diagnosis of or exclusion of emphysema, are not available. It is much easier to identify patients with emphysema determined by chest radiograph who do not have bronchitis. The most patients who require medical care for their disease fall into subsets 5 and 8. The patients in subset 1 and 2 do not have airway obstruction as determined by the FEV1, but have clinical radiographic feature of chronic bronchitis or emphysema, respectively. Because COPD, when defined as process, doesn't have airway obstruction as defining characteristic, and because the pure asthma is not included in the term of COPD. The patient subset 1 to 8 are included within the areas outlined by the shaded band, which denotes COPD. Next, the most important physiologic alteration with diffuse emphysema is an increased tendency to premature collapse of smaller airways during aspiration. The primary factor for this is the loss of normal elastic tissue, with the Rockwell properties that hold the bronchioles open, although there is some compression of the functional tissue by the bullae or airway spaces. As a pleural pressure increases during aspiration, the relatively unsupported airways close, trapping air that is measured as residual volume. Large or so-called giant bullae are relatively uncommon. They are usually multiple and nearly always associated with true diffuse emphysema in the rest of the lung. The pathophysiology of this giant bullae is a variation on the previously described theme diffuse bullous emphysema. Once an area of parenchymal weakness is of sufficient size, it is continues to fill with air profusely. The force of elastic recoil in the better lung then retracts away from the bullet. The surrounding lung is not, as previously thought, compressed by the high pressure within the bullet. Rather, the relatively more normal lung retracts away from the bullet, and the lack of elastic recoil in the adjoining airways lead to occlusion and atelectasis. Clinical feature. Although many patients with emphysema will also have bronchitis or hyperactivity airways, the following symptoms are typical. Dyspnea or difficulty breathing is the most frequent encounter symptom and generally present in all patients. Depending on the severity of the disease, this may be occur at rest, even requiring oxygen supplementation, or may be more subtle and manifest by decrease in exercise tolerance. Many patients also have cough that may or may not be productive sputum. Wheezing is another very common symptom as well as excess mucus production. Some patients may exhibit cyanosis. In all circumstances, emphysema results in diminished ability to deliver oxygen to the tissue. For example, if the brain is not receiving enough oxygen, the patient may be demonstrate irritability, confusion, and or mental instability. Next, diffuse emphysema. Diagnosis. The hallmark of emphysema is airflow obstruction during expiration caused by collapse of small airways that have lost the usual surrounding elastic tissue, which promotes airway expansion. Pulmonary function test, or PFT, is essential to establish the diagnosis. Spirometry indicates expiratory airflow obstruction with a reduction in the forced expiratory volume in 1 second, or FEV1, as well as reduction in ratio FEV1 per FVC, or forced expiratory capacity. With the worsening severity of the disease, lung volume increase, which leads to increase in total lung capacity. Functional residual capacity and residual volume. Further, eventually the diffusing capacity to carbon monoxide, or DLCO, diminishes, which is a result and a measure of the severity of the parenchymal destruction and the tissue loss characteristic of emphysema. Medical therapy. Smoking cessation is essential and by far the most important therapeutic maneuver available to treat patients. Although non-curative, middle-aged smokers who stop smoking experience a significant improvement in the rate of decline in pulmonary function and return to the annual changes seen in non-smokers. To achieve this benefit, all possible aid to achieve this goal should be provided to these patients, including the use of pharmacologic agents and nicotine replacement therapy. Bronchodilator agent, both oral and inhaler, can also provide symptomatic benefit in a patient with COPD, and in particular those with emphysema, the inhaled route is preferable as side effects are less common with this route compared with parenterally delivered medication. Beta-agonist drugs such as albuterol, which are also bronchodilators, provide symptomatic benefit. Side effects, including tremor and tachycardia, are associated with these agonists. The use of glucocorticoid is mildly controversial, although inhaled glucocorticoid can reduce the frequency of disease and exacerbation. Their use has been associated with increased rate of oral pharyngeal candidiasis and bone density loss. In general, the chronic use of oral glucocorticoids is not recommended because of what is considered to be an unfavorable risk-to-benefit ratio. Cervical therapy indication. The history of cervical emphysema is fascinating one. On the basis of flawed but well-intentioned logic, the early 20th century first saw interest cervical enlargement of the chest cavity and therefore presumably lung capacity by operations such as transverse sternotomy with costochondrectomy. Initially employed in horses, this operation failed to improve pulmonary function. Subsequently, on the basis of the observation that the chest and lung emphysema patient were abnormally large, operation to reduce chest capacity became attractive. Accordingly, procedures such as reduction trachoplasty and even phrenic nerve interruption to elevate the diaphragm were performed. Again, the benefit didn't result from this approach. Surgical effort culminated in the 1950 and 1960 with a series of reports from Brantigan. His prescient insight into the pathophysiology of emphysema led him to conclude that removal or exclusion of volume occupying peripheral and bolus region of the lung would improve pulmonary function by restoring the chest wall to a more effective configuration. He also reasoned that with resection of the diseased lung, the more normal remaining lung would be expanded by its preserved elastic level properties. Applying his theories to patients, the operations he performed were successful in improving pulmonary function in operative survivors, but the operations were associated with unacceptably high perioperative mortality rates and ultimately failed, in a part because the patient continued to smoke post-operatively. Consequently, this approach to emphysema patient was abandoned. Brantigan's ideas and concepts were resuscitated in the 1990. The first report by Wakabayashi and colleagues used a video-assisted thoracic surgical or FATS approach and laser contraction or consolidation of the peripherally the disease areas. Ultimately, this approach was shown to be less effective than operative resection of the more diseased areas when this concept was reintroduced by Cooper and his associates in 1994. The current operative procedure is termed lung volume reduction surgery or LVRS. Lung volume reduction surgery. Due to controversies and uncertainties surrounding patient selection for LVRS and to a lesser extent, operative technique like sternotomy or FATS, a multi-institutional prospective randomized investigation identified as a National Emphysema Treatment Trial (NETT) was conducted. The impact of multiple clinical laboratory variables on perioperative and long-term outcomes was assessed as LVRS was compared with maximal medical management in a prospective and randomized fashion. Tables 7.1 and 7.2 provide a detailed summary of the net conclusion regarding the indication and appropriate patient selection for LVRS. In general, patients who benefit the most from LVRS are those with low exercise capacity and upper lobe predominant, heterogeneously distributed emphysema. Figure 7.3 is an illustrative chest CT scan. The upper lobes display severe emphysematous changes, whereas the lower lobes are much less diseased. Appropriate candidates experience dyspnea that restrict their activities related to daily living and diminish their quality of life. This characteristic must be present despite the patient compliance with appropriate medical regimen, including smoking cessation. On the other hand, the patient must have sufficient diminished pulmonary function to require intervention, but enough to resolve both tolerate to the operation and the process the capacity for improvement. Appropriate LVRS candidate can in part be identified as having an FEV1 greater than 20% of predicted but less than 45%. Tables 7.1 and 7.2 provide additional criteria used to identify appropriate and reasonable candidates for LVRS. We can see in Table 7.1 the common inclusion and exclusion criteria for lung volume reduction surgery. The inclusion criteria: radiographic evidence of emphysema, especially involving upper lobes, hyperinflation, FEV1 above 20 and below 45% predicted, or post-bronchodilator, DLCO above 20% predicted, severe dyspnea, restricted activities of daily living, decreased quality of life, and abstinence from tobacco. Exclusion criteria: active smoking, bronchiectasis, pulmonary nodule requiring evaluation, excessive daily sputum production, previous tracheotomy, obvious pleural disease, active or inducible coronary ischemic, pulmonary hypertension, depressed LVEF below 45%, obesity, and systemic steroids above 20 mg per liter per day. LVRS technique. As for cervical technique, no difference in outcomes in terms of subjective or objective measure of pulmonary function between open and minimally invasive approach was identified by NIAT. However, the FATS approach resulted in an earlier recovery at lower cost compared with sternotomy. Analogous reports of patients undergoing FATS lung cancer surgery documenting less pain, shorter hospital stays, and earlier chest tube removal compared with patients undergoing tracheotomy. For those reasons, the FATS approach is most frequently employed for LVRS at present. Independent of the approach, the operative goal for LVRS is to resect the most diseased lung parenchyma. These regions are, as mentioned, almost exclusively located in the upper lobes. The location of these regions is suggested by preoperative lung ventilation or perfusion and chest tomographic scan, and is definitively identified intraoperatively, as the lung areas are the slowest deflate when a single lung ventilation of the contralateral lung is instituted. Gentle handling of these fragile tissues uh, and careful disease of adhesion to the chest wall as the lung is mobilized are critically important to minimize lung trauma and the incidence and severity of postoperative air leaks. A linear stapler with butt racing material is used to resect the disease area. The butt racing adds integrity to the staple line, thereby minimizing postoperative air leaks. As the disease is diffuse, both lungs are involved. A sternotomy is therefore used for bilateral access when an open approach is used. The appropriate resection is performed on the lung during the single lung ventilation of contralateral lung. This sequence is then reversed. For the FATS approach, the patient can be turned from one side to the other, allowing a sequential left and right lung resection. Alternatively, the patient can be positioned so that both pleural space can be accessed without the need for reposition. LVRS outcomes. The postoperative management patient after LVRS is frequently challenging. NETT identified the patient with an FEV1 of 20% or less predicted, and either the LCO of 20% or less of predicted, or a homogeneous pattern of emphysema on a chest CT was associated with a high perioperative high risk of death and should not be considered appropriate candidates for LVRS. Among patients without this high-risk factor, a 30 days mortality rate after LVRS was 2.2% compared with 0.2% in the medical therapy group. However, mortality rates among patients who are not at high risk were comparable. Mortality was 0.09 deaths per person in a year in the surgery group compared with 0.1 deaths per person per year in the medical therapy group. Risk ratio 0.889% and P 0.31. When a patient are appropriately selected, LVRS doesn't affect overall mortality. However, LVRS does expose patient to perioperative morbidity. Morbidity is minimized by selection of appropriate surgical candidates and having patient with in maximal physiologic condition, where pulmonary function has been optimized with preoperative 6 to 10 weeks pulmonary rehabilitation program. Attention to nutritional needs, as approximately half of all emphysema patients are deficient nutritionally, is also helpful. Despite these maneuvers, 58.7% of patients in a NET trial experience at least one complication. Cardiac dysrhythmia, the most common complication, occur in 23.5% of patients. The treatment required in 18.6%. Pneumonia was identified in 18.2% of patients. Predictably, pulmonary insufficiency was an issue, and 21.8% of patients require at least one reintubation. Tracheostomy was necessary in 8.2 and 5.1% couldn't be weaned from mechanical ventilation within 3 days of LVRS. You can see in table 7.2 criteria for determination of candidates for lung volume reduction surgery. Good candidates is history and physical examination. Age below 75 years. Emphysema by clinical evaluation. Ex-smoker above 4 months. Clinically stable or on no more than 20 mg prednisone daily. Significant functional limitation after 6 to 12 weeks of pulmonary rehabilitation and unoptimal medical therapy, and demonstrate compliance with medical regimen. And laboratory evaluation, post-bronchodilator FEV1 is below 45% predicted for all ages and above 15% if age above 70 years. Hyperinflation demonstrated by TLC above 100% predicted and RV above 150% predicted. Post-rehabilitation 6 month week days but 140. Low post-rehabilitation exercise capacity and HRCT demonstrating bilateral severe emphysema ideally with upper lobe predominance. And poor candidates is age above 75 years, history of recurrent bronchial infection with increased sputum production, cardiovascular comorbidities, including significant coronary artery disease, recent MI, myocardial infarct, and congestive heart failure or uncontrolled hypertension or arrhythmia, pulmonary hypertension at rest, non-pulmonary comorbidities causing significant functional limitation or that could limit survival, history thoracic surgery or chest wall deformity that could interfere with pulmonary resection, FEV1 below 20% predicted, and either DLCO below 20% predicted, or homogeneous distribution of emphysema on HRCT, non-upper lobe distribution of emphysema with high exercise capacity post-rehabilitation, and significant pleural or interstitial changes on HRCT. Okay. Next, prolonged air leaks following LVRS are persistent issue contributing to post-operative morbidity. In the NET experience, 90% of patients experience an air leak in the first 30 days after LVRS. Overall, the median duration of the air leaks was 7 days, and 60 of 56 of 40 496, or 13.3% patients suffer from air leaks that persist 30 days or longer following their operation. Neither the surgical approach, like open or patch choice of suture line buttressing material performance of parodosis, nor construction of pleural tents was shown to affect either the incidence or the duration of the air leaks. Post-operative chest tube management with use or no low negative pressure suction may be helpful by lessening the airflow through the visceral pleural defects. Finally, the patient with a persistent air leak can be discharged from the hospital with a hemorrhage valve placed on the chest tube to be removed when the air leak is ceased. Although the LVRS doesn't provide a survival advantage, the benefit of LVRS patients is in their improved quality of life. The NET study revealed that changes in exercise capacity, the 6-minute walk distance, percentage improvement in FEV1, quality of life, and the degree of dyspnea at 6 and 12 and 24 months over patients undergoing LVRS. Over those receiving maximal medical management, although the number of patients who ultimately qualify for and undergo LVRS may not be large, the positive impact and appropriate patient is significant. Another important benefit seen in LVRS is the reduction of health care costs. The first 12 months after randomization to treatment in the NET trial, the total cost per patient was higher in the LVRS group than the medical group due to the cost of operation and post-operative hospitalization. However, after 3 years, the cost-effectiveness ratio for LVRS compared with medical treatment was 190 million and then 300 per quality adjusted life year gain per patient. 90,000. Next, bronchoscopic technique. As LVRS is associated with significantly mortality, morbidity, and cost, 3 bronchoscopic lung volume reduction or BLVR approaches are currently being evaluated as a potential alternative to LVRS. The goal is to achieve a remodeling of the lung with exclusion and subsequent collapse of the same diseased lung are resected during LVRS. The 3 approaches currently being investigated include 1. Placement one-way valves in the appropriate bronchus to allow distal atelectasis and collapse the targeted lung region. One-way valve to allow distal atelectasis and collapse the targeted lung region by blocking the respiratory airflow. The second, use of radiofrequency catheter to create shunt pathway between the central airway and region hyperinflated lung to facilitate emptying of the diseased lung region that have delayed expiratory times. And 3. Installation of biological adhesive as separated liquid component that polymerize distal at the target site, leading to alveolar collapse and ultimately remodeling the hyperinflated areas. Bronchoscopic outcomes. BLVR is performed to exclude the hyperinflated lung areas and achieve an anatomic and physiologic situation that resembles the outcomes of LVRS without the need for an operative procedure with its attendant morbidity and mortality. Up until now, results have been inconsistent and are not yet on a par with LVRS. Consequently, BLVR is still considerably to be an investigated procedure to be evaluated further. Most patients do not have the same objective improvement in the exercise capacity and pulmonary function variables seen following LVRS, suggesting that much of the subjective improvement seen in BLVR patient may be related to placebo effect. Next, lung transplantation. Emphysema is currently most common indication for lung transplantation, accounting for nearly half of all lung transplant. The criteria for patient selection are essentially the same as those for LVRS, although the original interest in a lung transplantation was motivated by interest in a prolonged life prolonging life, survival benefit has not been demonstrated. Actual benefits do occur but are related to the combined improvement in quality of life through the improvement in pulmonary function and exercise capacity. Ongoing uncertainties relate to the choice between alveolus and lung transplantation as a better alternative, whether the single or double lung transplantation is the most appropriate procedure. The early hope that alveolus could serve as a bridge to transplantation has been diminished by the observation that prior alveolus increase the risk of bleeding during the transplantation and is considered by some relative contraindication to transplantation for this reason. Furthermore, the limited availability of donor lungs for transplantation limits its broad application to this patient population. Next, Guillain-Barré emphysema diagnosis. Clinical PFT characteristics of emphysema have been discussed and they all apply to patients with Guillain-Barré disease. This patient cannot be differentiated from diffuse emphysema patients by their symptoms or other clinical criteria. The distinctive feature and distinguishing findings in this patient are large bullae as seen on either chest X-ray or chest CT scan. The bullae occupy a significant portion of the chest cavity and the remaining lung is significantly compressed. Figure 7.4 illustrates the typical chest CT scan appearance of bilateral large bullae with compression of the adjacent relatively normal lung. Medical therapy. As these patients have diffuse emphysema along with a large bullae, they can be helped through the medical intervention previously described, particularly through cessation of smoking. This initial approach may be sufficient to eliminate the need for surgical intervention. At the present, however, there is no procedural modality that is specifically effective for Guillain-Barré emphysema. Okay. Surgical therapy. Indication: potential beneficiaries of cervical resection of Guillain-Barré disease, namely bulectomy, are patients with both significant dyspnea that limits daily activities and non-functioning bullae that are large enough to compress the adjacent normal lung parenchyma. A chest CT scan with intravenous contrast helps identify the patient who will benefit from surgery. If a bulla or several bullae are shown to occupy a third or more of the hemithorax, bulectomy is likely to improve oxygenation, translating into improved pulmonary function and improved quality of life for the patient. Furthermore, reduced blood flow to the adjacent and compressed lung parenchyma demonstrated on CT or pulmonary arteriogram also suggests benefit from bullectomy technique. Operation for diffuse emphysema include patch or an open technique via thoracotomy for unilateral bullae or sternotomy for bilateral large bullae. Regardless of the approach, the operation begins with a single lung ventilation of the contralateral lung, single lung ventilation. As a lung to be resected slowly deflates, the bullous extent is clearly identifiable. The roof of the bullae is incised, thus opening it and exposing its interior. Most of the bullet's wall is excised, leaving a rim of 2 to 3 centimeters of residual walls. The base of bullet is stapled by placing the stapler just on adjacent, just on the adjacent through parenchyma, taking care not to remove potentially functioning lung tissue. The remaining bullous wall is folded into the stapler where it serves as buttress material within the staple line, producing the likelihood of severity and duration of postoperative air leaks. And outcomes. The reported perioperative mortality rate for bullectomy range from 2.3% to 10%, with the most death related to pulmonary failure. The perioperative course is similar to the LVRS patient, as postoperative complication occurs in more than half of the patients. Cardiac dysrhythmia, pneumonia, and pulmonary insufficiency constitute the most common cause of morbidity. Just as with LVRS, preoperative optimization of the patient pulmonary function with cessation of smoking, bronchodilator therapy, and participation in a rehabilitation program are again important to reduce complication and serve to reduce complication. The most common complication is a prolonged air leaks, defined as lasting more than 7 days. Drawing from the LVRS experience, applying minimal or no suction to the chest tube may be reduce the frequency with which this complication occurs. Long-term post-bullectomy impact on quality of life and pulmonary function has not been as true as in NET study. However, several reported experiences have identified both clinical and functional improvement for at least 5 years after bullectomy. This improvement in quality of life correlates with improved FEV1, decreased residual volumes, and improved the vital capacity not in appropriately selected patients. So in the chapter 7, we studying about the giant bullous emphysema, about the medical therapy and surgical therapy, bullectomy. Then in emphysema, we studying about the LVRS technique and its outcome. Diffuse emphysema.